So we have covered the main theme of the Murdoch-owned Times newspaper peddling for the Johnson-fronted cabal to impose elected mayors on other areas, other than the areas that are already lumbered with this calamity and corruption. So today's newspapers include the I newspaper, the Daily Star, Daily Express, Daily Mirror, Daily Mail, Financial Times, Daily Boris Graph, the Times, the Sun. We haven't found the outlet didn't have the Guardian today, and we don't see the Communist Party Morning Star every day because it is not distributed. Most outlets in London don't carry the Morning Star, and the Morning Star is economical with the distribution. At most, there are 2 copies in the outlets that do carry it. So we pay the outlet and collect it periodically because the distance, due to the lockdown and other restrictions on transport, is not conducive to time saving and not cost effective. Now we are talking still, this is part D of the diagnosis of Fleet Street, and this diagnosis is still continuing about the stupidity of the Murdoch-owned Times. And the stupidity is evident in the so-called editorial endorsement and call for the imposition and empowerment of more elected mayors by the Boris Johnson fronted cabal on other areas. And this mea culpa, this is the kind of pun to make it read like or sound like mea culpa, like confession, like admission. Now, who is the guilty party here is not identified clearly because it's a very confused editorial. It's a very confused editorial, and it is contradictory, typically contradictory. And as the Private Eye current issue has said, the Times is dishonestly edited to suit the purpose and the image of the dirty digger who owns and controls the Times newspaper. And at the heart of the lying and dishonesty is the dispute that occurred in the early 1980s when Murdoch took over the Times. The Times and the Sunday Times are differently owned publications, but they became owned by the same kind of factor or element. Element is the word. And when Murdoch took over the Times, this followed quite a noticeable kind of objection from various persons in, quote, Fleet Street, especially the father of Jacob Rees-Mogg, William Rees-Mogg, who was editor of the Times. And Rees-Mogg resigned, I think, in protest against the Murdoch takeover of the Times. So when Harry Evans was appointed editor, the condition on which he accepted the editorship of the Times was that Rupert Murdoch would not interfere in the editorial policies. And according to Private Eye, and according to other revelations after the kind of departure of Evans from the Murdoch kind of stable, Murdoch obviously is a liar, so he lied and he didn't keep his word. And in the obituary of Harold Evans, published after Evans died recently in the last kind of fortnight, let's say, the Times completely lied about the events that happened there in that time, at that time, between Murdoch and Harold Evans. This is important because this editorial today, Mea Culpa, is kind of, it stinks of Murdoch's kind of narrative. Because Murdoch doesn't want democracy. He doesn't want democracy here. He doesn't want democracy in the USA. He doesn't want democracy in Australia. He doesn't want democracy anywhere. So the reason why we are devoting all the editions so far to dissecting the corrupt and stupid and ill-informed and ignorant and misleading editorial in the Times, Mea Culpa, calling for more mayors, is because we have the evidence, exclusive, world exclusive evidence, insight and background spanning over several decades about people involved as mayors or who became mayors later and their antecedents and their backgrounds. As we have said, the likes of Steve Bullock, who is no longer mayor of Lewisham, but who was a disgraceful occupant of the elected mayor post in Lewisham. Because when he got elected again, Bullock abused campaigners and abused them exactly in the same kind of language that Robin Wales in Newham had used against campaigners. So that shows that it was not just undemocratic, it was contemptibly anti-democratic and fascistic, the role. And the Times doesn't show any sign of any of that. It just uses the word mayor and the post of mayor as a kind of block, as a kind of lever with which to kind of hide, suppress, silence the voice of democracy in each of the relevant areas locally, and to serve as an extension of the government agenda or the big business agenda. Look at it, there is no word of democracy in this editorial today, Wednesday, the 14th of October, 2020. And the Times is using, say, for example, this particular paragraph, which actually praises Andy Barnum, of Greater Manchester mayor. And it says, one needs only to have observed the contributions of Andy Barnum, the Greater Manchester mayor, to debates over lockdown to know that relations between central government and the new awkward squad of local leaders thrust center stage by regional lockdowns have seldom been smooth. Yet their emergence as serious players need not endanger Mr. Johnson's authority. So that's what it is. They are quite actively accommodating of and supportive of and protective of Mr. Johnson's authority. How dare the Times, liars? It's nothing to do with the local communities whatsoever. It says, irritating though their opposition may be to Downing Street, metro mayors are not carbuncles on the Constitution and may yet prove to be enhancements. Exactly what we said. Addendum, extensions, stooges, and all the other things that can be applied to this corrupt and ignorant and anti-democratic kind of editorial so-called in the Times today, the 14th of October 2020. Now back to a local kind of example, back to Neom. In the letter that was published on The Guardian against one-party system, here is the letter in full. I shall be reading this, and it is signed in the name of a councillor, John Whitworth, London Borough of Newham, and it's in The Guardian. It says, as a councillor for the London Borough of Newham, I find the observations in your editorial, 22nd February of the year concerned, linking one-party councils and autocratic government only too true. So this Whitworth is saying that one-party councils and autocratic government are very much the case in Newham. Not only does Newham have no councillors other than from the Labour Party, it also has a directly elected mayor who has been in post since 2002. Now, Whitworth gets the number of years right, as opposed to Roxana Fiaz, who got the number of years wrong by 4 years in her spiel, aired on the 12th of March 2018. The powers of patronage afforded to such mayors has allowed Robin Wales to appoint 22 of the 60 councillors to cabinet, mayoral advisor, lead councillor posts, which all carry substantial responsibility allowances. This has produced a culture of conformity within the council, where little criticism of mayoral policy is openly voiced, and scrutiny has not effectively held the mayor to account. Now, this is the councillor that I have referred to in the previous edition, or in one of the earlier editions today. One of the Labour Party members praised this one, John Whitworth, to me as a person of conscientiousness and a supporter of Corbyn. At the time, the Corbyn was still leader, of course, until this April. And I have evidence of this Whitworth lying, because Whitworth was told of lying by the lying employees in post in Newham Council. And Whitworth failed to keep his word and failed to take any action as a member of the scrutiny committee. He probably is currently the chair of the scrutiny committee, so-called, but he criticizes the scrutiny committee's ineffectiveness as regards to the behavior of Robin Wales in 2018 or 2017, whenever this letter was published. And we can still check the letter, the date of this letter, the year of the letter published. We can check that one. And we can see that Guardian, it was a letter, executive mayors and one-party councils. It was a letter published in 2017. So it was just over a year before Roxana Fiaz kind of raised her flag and became the kind of plausible candidate for the Labour Party in the one-party state of Newham to replace Robin Wales. So John Whitworth wrote his letter. In reply to this piece, executive mayors and one party states, and this observation, the Guardian observation was the Guardian's view on electoral reform: shake up Britain's one-party states. That's the editorial in the Guardian, dated the 22nd of February 2017. So that's 3 years before today's Times, which is actually opposing the general thrust of that piece. And that piece, the first paragraph of that piece in the Guardian says, it has become increasingly fashionable to talk about Britain's emerging one-party state. Theresa May's Conservative Party may have a slim majority of 16 in the House of Commons, but as Labour finds itself languishing in the polls and split over Brexit, the key dynamic shaping contemporary politics seems to be that between government and opposition, but within the Tories, and especially between Mrs. May and her party's old Eurosceptic right. Wednesday's softening on the business rates changes follows a backlash from Conservative MPs, not Labour. Functioning opposition providing decent scrutiny is critical to good government, and all the rest of it. So decisions end up being taken not in the open during formal council meetings, but in back rooms. That is what it is saying in there. And it says a significant number of councils have just handful of opposition councillors, or as in the case of Labour-controlled Newham in London, none at all. A key culprit is the first past the post system, still used to elect councillors in the vast majority of English and Welsh wards. The smaller and more homogeneous the geographic region in which the system is used, the more likely these one-party states will emerge. This creates a democratic deficit on a number of levels. And all the general slogans about democracy, which on the evidence that we have investigated, and we investigate every day, including today, these slogans are toothless, useless, as is the letter from John Whitworth, because he himself is a liar and he has lied on several occasions. He features in about 50 kind of direct communications sent by email to him. And he features in about 100 other communications that have referred to him and his role and his lying and his dishonesty. And overall, our investigation includes, or our research, investigative research and empirical evidence cover about 5,000 communications conducted into Newham and with Newham Council during the period under review, which is from July 2016 up to now, today, 14th of October 2020. The sheer physical, mental, intellectual, and logistical resources necessary to conduct in 4 years 5,000 plus communications exceeds the availability of or access to resources, human and other material resources, that would cost about 10 million pounds in all the circumstances included. So this is the exclusive evidence on which we base this exclusive diagnosis of the media in Britain and in Fleet Street. So we have referred to today's Times and we have referred to the Guardian view dated the Let's get the date right again. The Guardian view about local government based on Wednesday. Today is a Wednesday, why it is not in February. This was Wednesday, the 22nd of February 2017. So that particular editorial in the Guardian 3 years ago would have been included in the print pages of the paper the following day, which is the 23rd, I think, of February 2017. And the evidence of John Whitworth behaving as a crony, as a mentally willed and willing crony of Roxana Fayaz, is to be found in his interventions. He's not even weasel word utterer. He's worse than that. He's a very morally dubious individual who has got a few stock phrases but has no substance to back up any claim he makes about democracy, let alone for democracy. And the evidence is that he has been a councillor in Newham. He has been a long-ranging member of the Labour Party in Newham, and he is not on the record. He's not on any record anywhere as having campaigned for democracy, democratic audit and accountability by the council. And in the years, he says that Robin Wales had been mayor since 2002. But in that period, 2002, until Wales was removed in the kind of reselection or selection process, so-called, in which he took part as well, this Whitworth, in 2018. In the 16 years, Whitworth has not hit any headline or grabbed anything in terms of the local news as a voice, as an effective voice, or as a strong voice, or as an honest voice for democracy and democracy regime in Newham. So the evidence condemn the likes of Whitworth, who are not just ordinary members of the Labour Party, but have been specifically associated with the Corbyn-fronted version of the so-called Labour Party. So for 16 years, this Whitworth was silent about the autocratic, dictatorial, corrupt behavior and policies and conduct of Robin Wales. So Robin Wales may have been worse than Whitworth, but Whitworth was no better than any other intellectually, morally, politically dead member of the Labour Party in Newham. Which is why Roxana Fayaz's assertion on the half-hour program aired on 12th of March 2018 that Newham was a Labour stronghold has to be seen on the foundation of politically dead members of the Labour Party. And in the 2 years plus 3 months since she got into that position, Roxana Fayaz's only claim to have made any different kind of steps must be limited on the evidence to her corrupt behavior in blaming Robin Wales for her failures. Because Robin Wales said on the same program where I confronted or challenged him on the 14th of March 2018, Robin Wales said that Roxana Fayaz had been making promises that he suggested might be difficult to deliver. And that is exactly what has happened. My saying this does not in any way mean that I am agreeing with Robin Wales. Rather, the Robin Wales was stating an obvious and clearly visible fact that Roxana Fiaz was not made of any moral fiber that actually enabled her or would enable her to morally deliver anything better than Robin Wales himself was doing. And the findings about Roxana Fiaz, as I said, thousands of communications have been made in the last 4 years. And thousands of communications are all substantial, evidential. None of them is guesswork. Everything is solid evidence and fact. And thousands of communications, thousands of questions put to Adrian May, put to the previous chief executive post holder who served with Robin Wales for many years, and put to others in the council, are continuing to be not answered by Newham Council. So when Roxana Fiaz thanked me on the 4th of September 2018 and at the East Ham Town Hall, and thanked me in particular twice in a very short conversation, given the context, it could have gone on and should have gone on for at least an hour, but it did go on for only a few minutes. In that short conversation, which she initiated by praising me and thanking me for transparency role, that I was putting the necessary observational and pro-democratic attention for her to be behaving transparently. There has been no transparency from Roxana Fiaz in relation to these thousands of questions and thousands of communications outstanding and continuing to be outstanding about Roxana Fiaz fronted corrupt regime in Newham Council in East London. So where on earth does this stupid Times newspaper editorial come from? What evidence? Mere mention of Andy Barnum is not good enough, is not substance enough, is not evidence enough. And I have mentioned not just Roxana Fiaz in Newham, I have mentioned Steve Bullock, the corrupt mayor of Lewisham, whom I had known in a different capacity when he was serving the ego and the propaganda operation of Ken Lying Still Livingston at the Greater London Council in the 1980s. And I have discussed the evidence of lying, of deception, of dishonesty and disrespect to the local community by Lutfur Rahman, who abused Tower Hamlets Council and corruptly paid money, thousands of pounds, to more than one outfit in Tower Hamlets in order to get their support, even though some of those recipients of the money that belonged to the people of Tower Hamlets had not themselves made any application for funding by the council. So the corruption, the extent of the corruption by Lutfur Rahman was beyond the ordinary propensity of the corrupt post holder and abuser of public money and public office. He imposed, just imagine the phrase, he imposed public money on groups that he thought would support him. It was worse than bribery. Worse than bribery, and it was nothing. It was absolutely nothing to do with the ethnic consideration. Although, coincidentally, some of the recipients of the public money, recipients who received the money at the behest, on behalf of, in order to suit the cravings for support exhibited by Lutfur Rahman while in post of elected mayor in Tower Hamlets. Where did the Times find the stupidity of assumptions to write this editorial, Mayor Kalpa today? They had not heard of Lutfur Rahman. How come? Because Lutfur Rahman was in post from October 2010 until the 23rd of April 2015. And the Times newspaper, wherever it was actually based in those years, was within Tower Hamlets, either in Wapping or just across the river Thames, on the other side of the Thames, in the borough of Sadak. Whichever location, Tower Hamlets was not at all far away. So how did the Times ignore or fail to notice what went on in Tower Hamlets? It couldn't have done. It didn't fail to notice. It chose to pretend in today's editorial that Tower Hamlets didn't happen, that Lutfur Rahman didn't happen, that the corruption finding against Lutfur Rahman by the accountants and other corruption findings by Richard Morey, the election commissioner, and other abuse findings by the Ministry of Housing, whatever, fronted by Eric the Pickles. However dislikable Eric the Pickles is, the evidence available to him included substantially objective amount of evidence of wrongdoing, misuse, and abuses by Lutfur Rahman in the post of mayor in the name of Tower Hamlets during October 2010 until 23rd of April 2015. Now, when Eric the Pickles gave a spiel on the 4th of November 2014 against Lutfur Rahman, he called him or accused him, Lutfur Rahman, of behaving as a medieval monarch. So let's see what the Pickles actually said. So he speak. Okay, on the dated the 4th of November 2014, that is 5 years ago, Patrick Winter, the political editor at The Guardian at the time, his piece, as published online now, reads as follows. The community secretary, Eric Pickles, is to take over the administration of Tower Hamlets Council in East London for 2 years. After an inquiry commissioned by his department found evidence of a crony culture in which grants and properties were handed to favored groups and proper procedures were ignored. Now, that is a very kind of restrained kind of description. And the headline is, in the Guardian online, Eric Pickles takeover within quotation mark rotten Tower Hamlets. Crackdown on London Borough's partisan approaches to politics represents one of his biggest interventions in local government. Now, quite apart from the errors that are very common to the Guardian, this kind of write-up is full of idiotic inaccuracies. I mean, not in the same direction as the Times, because the Times is asking for more powers and more resources and more posts of elected mayors. But this one is focusing on the Tower Hamlets Borough and on the findings of the audit that Eric Pickles' department then had just kind of received the result of the audit, yeah? And what happened in the details is also worth examining, because the Guardian is wrong on the facts, and I'll explain how it is wrong. Pickles is to dispatch 3 commissioners to oversee grant-giving appointments, property deals, and the administration of future elections in the borough. The inquiry, conducted by accountants PricewaterhouseCoopers, found contracts were awarded without the appropriate paperwork, while Lutfur Rahman, the independent elected mayor, personally selected preferred companies. This is what I was saying earlier, that Lutfur Rahman foisted money on elements and groups that didn't even apply for the money. That is what the details said. And what happened was that Lutfur Rahman abused his position and gave money to the organizations or groups because he knew the individuals operating the bogus kind of organizations, because many of those organizations are bogus. By bogus, I mean the same meaning as bogus. Look up the dictionary and you will find the fraud, non-existence, untruthful, and faked and fabricated, let's say. Now, the reason why this is so important is because of what the Times is saying, that mayors are the tribunes of the people. Tower Hamlets remains one of the most deprived boroughs in all of England, as it was deprived in October 2010 when Lutfur Rahman got in. And the fact that Lutfur Rahman was able to do the choosing of the groups and was able to override the role of the kind of permanent employees of the council who are supposed to be in place to scrutinize the validity and verify the authenticity and all the other things that needed to be verified and authenticated about the party or parties seeking public money, shows that those employees were not following the law and were allowing Lutfur Rahman to break the law. And this is about a period which covers my warnings to him, my warnings including the fact that if he didn't stop the corruption in the council and by Tower Hamlets Council, then incalculable damages and losses to the community and to the world would be caused. And for 5 years, Lutfur Rahman told lies to me via Alibor Chaudhry. And he dodged my repeated warnings to him that he had to meet me, otherwise he would be responsible for those losses. And he did cause the losses. The one time he agreed to meet me, Lutfur Rahman did so by breaking other laws. He organized a meeting with me, which was about the council's role, not about anybody else in the community's role. And he met me without any council employees being present at all. Instead, he had a number of persons from the community who had nothing to do with the council. They were not employees of the council, and they were not subject to the ordinary and general standard of compliance with the law that all employees must abide by, and a compliance that I actually would insist on being complied with. And that meeting was a completely dishonestly organized meeting. One of the persons who rushed to attend that meeting arrived after I had arrived, and he was physically panting, gasping for breath. Now, looking at him, I knew that Lutfur had ordered that person to appear there. The meeting was about my claims against the council, not against anybody in that context in the community. In any case, if I had a claim against anyone in the community, I would not have that meeting in the council, would I? And my claims were based on Lutfur Rahman's 5 years, or that time 4 years of lying to me through Alibor Chaudhry, saying, repeatedly passing the message to me through Alibor Chaudhry that he, Lutfur Rahman, fully respected me and was fully in agreement with me, and he was doing his best to address all the issues. He was lying on every respect. And I knew that he was lying, and I told Alibor Chaudhry that Lutfur was lying. But Alibor Chaudhry was under the same kind of command because Lutfur was the incumbent post holder in the position of mayor. So Alibor Chaudhry was kind of somehow emotionally bound to listen to Lutfur Rahman and treat Lutfur Rahman more seriously than Alibor Chaudhry treated any of what I said. And I told Alibor Chaudhry at one point, did he, Alibor Chaudhry, think that what I said was less important than what Lutfur Rahman said? Or did he think that I was somehow lacking in intellectual abilities and cognitive skills as compared to Lutfur Rahman? I knew this was happening. I knew that Alibor was being confused and being misused and abused by Lutfur Rahman, as was that other person who appeared to attend the meeting with me and Lutfur Rahman while he was panting and gasping for breath. And I asked him, what are you doing? And he said, without elaborating on it, he said he had been told to come. He arrived, as well as the so-called chief reporter of Channel S television, who was present there. He had no business being there at all. So those two must have been there at Lutfur's behest to witness Lutfur's attempts to kind of deal with my outstanding claims against council. But it was a complete criminal act. It was a complete criminal act because it was nothing to do with Lutfur addressing my outstanding claims against our Hamlet's council, which remain outstanding to this day, which is 5 years, and April, May, June, July, August, September, 5.5 years since Lutfur was ousted from that post. And in the next edition, or next relevant edition, because we may not have a next edition immediately after this afternoon, but in the next edition we shall be going into the behavior of the person who is in post and has been in post since 11th of June 2015. That is the diminutive liar John Biggs. So when the Times says that mayors should be given the credit and recognition as the tribunes of the people, the Times could not be more wrong. And I think that the Times is typical of the rest of Fleet Street, because in the years since Richard Morey published his ruling kicking Lutheraman out of the post, and in the ruling saying also that he was making copies available to the Metropolitan Police and to the Law Society and all the other kind of relevant external organizations. Although he said that, no criminal action has been taken against Lutheraman. And that is something that needs to be put to the Times. Why? Either the accountants were lying about Lutheraman, or Lutheraman was lying, or the Secretary of State Eric Pickles was lying. They could not all have been telling the truth. And if one party or more than one party or person was not telling the truth about the public resources being abused by Lutheraman, then whoever was or were responsible for the handing over the public money, whatever the amount, needs to be held to account. And there is no exemption for crimes. There is no time limit that stops a crime being prosecuted or kind of proceeded with accounting for the crimes of anyone, whoever they are. In the speech that Pickles gave on the 4th of November 2014, he used the term medieval monarch about Lutheraman. As I said in the previous recording, Lutheraman was not behaving as a medieval monarch, but Lutheraman was behaving as a modern day corrupt occupant in a publicly paid for post. And the reason why Lutheraman was allowed to carry on as a corrupt abuser of the post he was holding was not just because he didn't know the duty that he was under, not to be corrupt and to behave honestly and fairly and truthfully at all times, but because the culture in the media is contaminated itself and is not really rigorous, anywhere near rigorous or questioning. All the newspapers in Fleet Street, Daily Mail and the Express and the Sun and the others, have been aware of Tower Hamlets Council corruption. And yet none of them has devoted anything like the attention they would have given if there was an issue, for example, involving an alleged abuse of an alleged white child by an alleged Muslim foster family, which is exactly what the Times made a big issue of and has been found to have been motivated by racist agenda to damn the Muslim people in Tower Hamlets, not the council, but Muslim people of Tower Hamlets. So therefore, the press is criminally engaged in defaming entire communities. And they are prepared to do that even at the risk of openly allowing actually known criminals to be allowed to get away with their crimes, as long as those crimes do not have any kind of potential use to be used by racists. And Luther Roman's crimes were treated as less racially useful by the Murdoch-owned, Murdoch-controlled Times than the case of the child that never existed in that form, in that description, as the Times initially portrayed her to be. The child, white child being made to behave like a Muslim, Christian child, yes, a blonde Christian child made by Tower Hamlets Council foster parents to behave like a Muslim child, which was found to have been complete invention. So the Times is more interested in racially inventing fictional kind of victims of Muslim abuse in Tower Hamlets rather than a known evidence-based corruption by the elected mayor imposed at the time. We shall be continuing.